Pastor, this one's actually real personal to me because I hadn't heard this story when I first came on staff, but we use this saying a lot of cutting the ends off the ham, and just want to have you give some background and color to that.
Yeah, the story is like a legendary old school preacher / leadership story. And the anecdote is that this woman one day was preparing a ham for her family for dinner. And her husband was watching her, and he noticed how she cut the ends off the ham, put it in the pan, and then cooked it. And he asked her, "Why do you do that? Why do you cut the ends off the ham?" And she said, "Because my mom did." And so the next time they were around the mom, they asked, "Hey, why do you cut the ends off the ham before you cook it?" And she said, "Well, that's what my mom did. My mom taught me how to cook ham." So they called now the grandmother and said, "Why do you cut the ends off the ham?" And she said, "Because the pan was too small. We couldn't fit the ham in the pan. We had a small pan and had to cut the ends off to get it to cook." And somebody had been doing something that they saw done without understanding why it was done, and they were wasting, in this case, the ends of the ham, but also adding an unnecessary step. And you see this happen a whole lot when something grows, and especially if there's a high desire to stay true to the original vision. And it happens at least once every 2 weeks, probably more than that. Something will come to my attention that I'll go, "We're still doing that?" And we get to the bottom of it, somebody will say, "Well, we thought that's what you wanted us to do." And the reason that they thought I wanted that done is because the last thing I said about it was 3.5 years ago. And I said, "Let's do this or that." One time when we first started growing as a staff and we had our first offices and everything, we found out that one staff member was having meetings with his staff member team. He had 2 people who were on full-time staff who met with him. And they were having them at night at Panera, and they were sitting down having their nightly Wednesday night or Tuesday night staff meetings after hours at Panera. And we just asked why they were doing that. And he said, "Because that's what the original staff did. That's what the core team did. We thought that's what we needed to do." And we told him, "No, we met at Panera because we didn't have offices. We met at night because everybody had jobs during the day, cutting the ends off the ham." And it wasn't like, man, I wanted to go retro, old school, create that same sense of sacrifice. It was just a thoughtless way of doing it. And what you got to do if you're going to be valuable to this team, volunteer, staff, intern, at any level, you will have to learn how to translate values and principles into behaviors and actions that are appropriate for that season. One time I complained that I felt like a certain task was being approached like monkeys were back in the back pushing a button. And they never thought about why they were pushing the button. They just pushed the button, pushed the button, pushed the button, pushed the button, pushed the button. And the particular case I was talking about was the way something was being written. It was being written the way it was written when it was written for something else. Yeah. And nobody took the time to say, well, if we're going to write this for a different purpose, we need to modify the language because it doesn't apply in this way anymore. And I could give a million examples of this. I see it all the time. So cutting the ends off the ham has to do more with taking a tradition that was valuable in a season and then just implementing it wholesale without evaluating what were the principles and the values behind the practice, and then how can you update it and make it current. Right. So seating people a certain way in our church isn't necessarily up for grabs. Until further notice, we seat people very close together because that's something that if I ever find out at a campus that a campus pastor thought that it was cutting the ends off the ham to seat people close, and that's something we did when we started, but we've advanced beyond that now, then I'm going to know he doesn't understand there's a principle guiding that, and the principle is the principle of room dynamic, and until that principle changes, that we're going to do it this way. So you've got to keep on cutting the ends off the ham, so to speak, in that regard. But we have experimented since then with priority seating, which means how come we're punishing people who get to church earlier on time, by making them sit in the worst seat if they don't want to sit in the front. So let's incentivize that the best we can by opening up more seating and allowing people to sit where they want, and then backfilling, and we can still pack out the room, but we don't necessarily have to do it the way we did it when we had 100 people. And so we're taking the principle and then applying it to the specific situation. The difference between leaders, and I don't want to use the word managers negatively, but I would say leaders and workers, maybe a better distinction, is your ability to analyze what is the value and the principle that's driving this, and then how can I best express that? Because you should be thinking of ideas and solutions that are better than your supervisor can think of because you're in the details. Better than your team leader can think of because you're in the details. And that's the difference between somebody who adds huge value and somebody who just gets a job done, is that you come back and say, we were doing these in a group of 300 every time we printed them when we started. Now it's 3,000 every time we print it. Do we still want to continue to do this, or should it be digital at this point, at this scale, because it's costing us $18,000 a year? Now you just thought like a leader. Now you just thought like an owner. And you don't have to have a position on an org chart to think that way. And you don't have to be contrary to think that way. And you don't have to guess in the dark to think that way. You synthesize it, bring it to a solution, take it to your leader, present it, and ask. If the value is clarified and they say stay the course, you stay the course. But they might be able to make an adjustment that could really move the church forward. So you are our eyes and ears. And the fresher you are to this movement, this church, and what we're trying to do, the more you might see that we may have gotten used to. And so the people who are the newest, who are scared to ever say, I don't understand why we do this, and I think I could make it better if you would allow me to, those people are scared to speak up because they're still trying to earn their spot. And so the key is, when you do speak up about something like that, is to say it in a way that's solution-oriented, in a way that makes you willing to do the work to get it done. Right. If you're bringing a solution that doesn't involve you, then you're probably being lazy. If you're bringing a solution that creates less work for you, and that's the whole point is, I don't really want to do this because it's a lot of work, then you should probably keep your mouth shut and do it. But if you really believe you could add value to us by doing it a different way, doing something better, or doing something in its place, then don't cut the ends off the ham, process it, take the value, interpret the behavior, and then update and modify as needed. That's how you keep growing.